I, an old man, wonderfully blessed, carry the love of God as my king, my guide through the streets of crowded people. I too have measured out my life in coffee stores, for I cannot walk alone in this crowded room of good, evil men. How my heart begs and burdens as I walk down this side of the street, while on the other side they walk too. I am a man warmed by the sun and cooled by the breath of the night wind. Look across the street and cry for my brother, because he cannot see the light of light hidden behind the wall of presence. How shameful that my brother and I have outgrown the wisdom of our nine just fathers. As I move along on the strength of my hand through the crowded, empty streets, I think of that inevitable day when right as a serpent with an deadly venom shall rise up and strike and kill these people of the streets. And I, an old man, clutching my cane, shall stand in the center of the street.
Good afternoon. It's my privilege to thank each one of you for coming today. My friend, Dr. Brinson, by title Reverend Dr. Brinson, said that would be the best introduction that could be given to him today. So I'm not going to list his credentials. He and I traveled to South Africa together for the election at the time that Nelson Mandela was elected. So civil rights was part of his growing years and something that is a part of him. We welcome Dr. Brinson with us today.
Good afternoon. We're happy to see everybody here today. We're all going to stand, and back during the Civil Rights Movement, one of the songs that became a sort of unofficial anthem for was We Shall Overcome. It was a song of strength for those marching for equality and standing for equality and speaking for equality. So today we'd like everybody to stand. We'd like to sing this together. If at the end everybody wants to hold hands again as a sign of unity and solidarity, you definitely can, and it's welcome. So please stand with us as we sing together. The words will be on the screen.
We Good afternoon. It is a pleasure and a blessing for me to have the opportunity to be with you in this beautiful place. If the kingdom is any more beautiful than this, then I don't guess I'm ready for it. But it is truly a beautiful setting for worship, for just sharing and meditating. It is a blessing for me to be here with my friend, Esther Irish, and her husband, and the people of those of you whom I'm just meeting. Pastor Irish and I had the privilege of not only working together in American Baptist churches in terms of our relationships, mine administration, hers board, but we had the privilege of traveling together to South Africa to work with the IEC, Independent Electoral Commission, in the election of Nelson Mandela in the first free and open elections in 1994. 1994, wasn't it, Esther? I'm too little old, I can't remember right now. Esther's much younger than I am. But in all seriousness, it is a great privilege to be here and to be reminded that we are in the church, which has been the foundation for all that we do, think, and believe as Christians. And as we gather here this afternoon in the wake this church is in this year of 250 years. Also in the birthday celebration for Martin Luther King Jr., and oddly enough, in the death of Nelson Mandela. There are many events which converge and come together here as we are brought into this place today. And we always think we joke about crowds sometimes, say, well, there were only so many people. I say, well, Jesus said, where 2 or 3 are gathered. The effectiveness of our time together does not depend on the numbers, but the quality of the time that we spend together. And so I'm thankful for this time that we've come together. And I ask you just for a moment to just bow your heads, please. Here we are, God. In this place, in this moment, in a time that we've never seen before, in a moment that we will never see again. We ask you to be into our midst as we come bringing our own thoughts, our own histories, from across the community and across the streets. But we come knowing that we are all children of the same God. And so we would ask now that as we share in this time, that you would bless us and be with us, and let this be a time that will be changing, a changing moment in the life of this church, family, and community. In the name of Jesus, we do pray. Amen. This is a beautiful day, isn't it? It's a day that the whole country has been brought together under snow, ice, and cold temperatures. In the last week, I have flown from Seattle, Washington, back to Atlanta, and prior to that in Orlando, and then here today. But everywhere I have gone, I have seen the ice and the snow and the cold temperatures. So we can come together, can't we? Even if nature has to bring us together. But in all seriousness, in Orlando, everybody thought that Orlando was going to be so hot for me. We were going down to Orlando to get away from the cold. And the first 2 days of that week, it was freezing down there. So it just goes to show you that we have nothing to do with nature, do we? God still controls nature. And all we have to do is live in it, through it, around it, and that's all we can do. I want to begin to sort of sharing some personal thoughts today in ways that I can give in terms of my own life and my ties with Martin Luther King Jr. and his family. But I want to do a scripture passage. Since we are in church, and this is sermonic in its nature and in its goal, even though more informal, I want to read a familiar passage to you to begin our thinking together. In Luke, the 10th chapter, beginning with verse 25, we find these words. A teacher of the law came up and tried to trap Jesus. Teacher, he asked, what must I do to receive eternal life? And Jesus answered him, what do the scriptures say? How do you interpret them? And the man answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. You are right, Jesus replied. Do this, and you will live. But the teacher of the law wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, who is my neighbor? And Jesus answered, there was once a man who was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when robbers attacked him, stripped him, and beat him up, leaving him half dead. And it so happened that a priest was going down that road. But when he saw the man, he walked down by on the other side. And the same way, a Levite also came there, went over and looked at the man, and then walked on by on the other side. But a Samaritan who was traveling that way came upon the man, and when he saw him, his heart was filled with pity. He went over to him, poured oil and wine on his wounds, and bandaged them. And then he put the man on his own animal and took him to an inn where he took care of him. The next day he took out 2 silver coins and gave them to the innkeeper. Take care of them, he replied. He told the innkeeper, and when I come back this way, I will pay you whatever else you spend on him. And Jesus concluded, in your opinion, which of these 3 acted like a neighbor toward the man attacked by the robbers? The teacher of the law answered, the one who was kind to him. And Jesus replied, you then go and do the same. So often we forget that Jesus went about his ministry talking in parables and telling stories and relating to people where they were. And there is no different than for us here today. When we look at the way parables were nothing but stories or examples so that every man might understand. So he says now, we are to treat each person as our neighbor. Now, who is our neighbor? In essence, our neighbors are any persons who need us. It is a man on the street. It is a young woman cast out from her family. It is the hungry. It is those who are persecuted for many reasons. It is the gay person out on the street being ostracized by his or her family. It is the black man being chased through a neighborhood and shot in the back. It is the Jewish boy who is not accepted within his block because he doesn't live in the Jewish community. It is a Japanese person of another skin. It is the Hindu. It's everybody who needs us is our neighbor. Jesus also said something else, and then I will go directly to Martin Luther King Jr. and his work. He also gave us several things to do. Now, I'm talking to you as the church of God. Jesus said that we should love God, ourselves, our neighbor, and he said, judge not, that you be not judged. Jesus was a bad man, wasn't he? Because he dared to come walking into the lives of those people on the roads of life and to speak up in the very areas that they were sensitive about. And that's the method and work of the church. In Montgomery, Alabama, in the mid-1950s, 1954 or so, 55, at the peak of segregation in the South, a black woman by the name of Rosa Parks was coming home one day. She was a seamstress. And for those of you who may not know the term, one who sews and makes clothes. You know, you might laugh, but you know, you'd be surprised that in this days of gadgets and computers and tablets and all these, people don't know words and things now like they used to. We don't even spell the words out. We abbreviate everything. We don't write anymore. We don't communicate. You sit next to one another and text each other instead of turning and looking. So I can't assume anything. Rosa Parks was a seamstress. So, and she was tired and she was sitting on the bus. Now, let me tell you about the bus. For those of you who are in the North, probably have never, and especially younger, this was a long time ago now. I'm 75 years old. So if I knew this as a boy, you know it was a long time ago. Most of you already thought of it in many ways. But Rosa Parks got on the bus, and she went back to sit down. And they rode a few blocks, and a white man came and got on the bus. And so because he wanted to sit, there was no seat for him to sit in front of her. He would have to sit behind her. Well, the bus driver got up and told her, you have to move and let this man sit down. You have to move back to the back. And so she said, I'm not going to do this. And she didn't move, so she was arrested. Now let me tell you about boarding those buses. Now, you see my screen here, don't you? If this is the front of the bus, then if you get on the bus and put your money in the slot at the front, well, then you got off you couldn't go back and just sit down, go back to the back if that's where you were supposed to sit. You had to come back, step back off the bus and walk back to the middle of the bus. And then they would let you come in at the middle door. And sometimes the bus drivers would be nasty and pull off after you paid your money and you left there. And so, you know, people get tired of that kind of stuff sometimes. So Rosa Parks decided she was not going to get up. And she sat down. And there in that moment, she was arrested and carried to jail. And so the word got out because she had worked with the local chapter of the NAACP. That was the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, which still exists today. And so she decided that she was going to, they decided that we got to do something about this. Rosa has been arrested, and we can't keep taking in this. It doesn't make sense. It's not fair. It's not right. We know it's not right. And we've got to stand up. So a group of the preachers from the churches, the black churches, got together. And the tragedy is that there were a whole lot of white churches in Birmingham. In Montgomery. I'm moving ahead now. In Montgomery at the time. But none of them offered to join with them. So did they serve a different Christ? But nevertheless, it would make a long story short. It gets to the point where they meet together and And they decided I know what we're going to do. To show that we are tired of this, we're going to boycott the buses for one day. And see, much of the profit from the bus company came from those persons who were the maids and servants who rode the buses into into the houses where they worked, so forth and so on. And so when at the end of that day, it was all over the news and everything. Negroes stay off of buses. And what finally grew, and I say this quickly, to some other meetings, they said, well, if we could do this for this one day, then we can do this, we can organize and do it for a longer period, and maybe something can come out of it. Maybe the buses can finally be integrated. And so the preachers came together. Now, they were all erudite men. I'm the pastor of so-and-so church, and I'm the pastor of this church, and I'm the pastor of that church. Each one a little bigger than the other, Of course, we don't have those kind of people today, I'm sure. But anyway, so they finally got together in a meeting. So it just so happens that right during that time, there was a young man who had just moved to Montgomery. He finished up his doctorate at Boston University and had just married his young, beautiful bride, Coretta Scott. And so he was the new kid on the block at the most sophisticated of churches, the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, one of those first churches in Montgomery. There's a first church in every city, in every area. I'm sure that this was the first church at one time. And when I say, you know what I mean by the first church? No, you don't, do you? I forgot we're up north. But the first church was the church that everybody, this was the one that looked up, all the prominent people would attend this church. So when they got to the point, they said, well, we're going to elect somebody to be the spokesperson. Now, they had two purposes. First of all, they wanted to elect somebody to put out in the front because they knew that there was going to be trouble. And the second thing was that we'll really pull the strings. So the most likely person would be this young King guy, Martin Luther King, Jr. So they elected him the leader. And they don't know what they had unleashed. He didn't go looking for this at all. He suffered in painful ways to see what he could draw upon. And he went back in his mind and he remembered Henry David Thoreau at Walden Pond, and he looked at India, at what was going on with Gandhi, and he looked at Jesus and nonviolence and the practical. He looked at a lot of things. Well, what could we do eventually? And we need to do something. We could really do something if we taught people how to love instead of hate. If we taught them how to fight back with love instead of violence. You've heard him say so many times that violence, or an eye for an eye, leaves everybody blind. And so it went on. So I'm saying this to say that Martin Luther King Jr. walked from that little church in Montgomery to become one of the most idolized and celebrated persons of the 20th century. Now, what's so special about him? Go back to the story I just read of the Good Samaritan. Martin Luther King Jr. came from he didn't come from a poor life. When we grew up, he grew up in a house with a father and a mother and training in the church. And I mean, they were not considered at all in a poor and Negro society in those times. He came from a middle class setting. And so he didn't have to go getting into this kind of thing. He'd always wanted to just go back to his college, our college, Morehouse College. He wanted to one day succeed Dr. Benjamin E. Mays, whom he admired. But it wasn't because it would have made him a big man. We were never taught, never, about thinking of ourselves. It was all about what we can do with our lives for other people. Okay, back to the Good Samaritan. People call Martin Luther King Jr. a dreamer. Oh, he's been called a lot of worse things, but they call him a dreamer. They know him for his famous I Have a Dream speech was an improvisation on something he had already done in 1963 for the March on Washington. And he didn't stand up to do that, but he was urged to do it. And he did. It was not in his script. But my point is that all culminated because he was concerned about what was happening to others, to his own people, to people in the streets of Montgomery, all over the South, around the world. He was hearing what Jesus had told us. Love your neighbor as yourself. Rosa Parks was his neighbor. All of the Negroes who were held in segregated bondage and so forth, these were the people that he was ultimately to give his life for. Now, to make this personal, he didn't do it for himself. He didn't ask to be catapulted up before the world. He didn't ask to be shot down. He didn't ask for his mother to be shot down in a church or his brother to drown. Or he didn't ask to be taken to jail for so many times and threatened. He didn't ask for any of that. All he was trying to do was to minister to the people on that Jericho road. He was really answering the need and the mandate of the church. How many of us are willing to do that? Not many, are we? But to really be the church in the world, we are to be those people who listen to the edicts of Jesus Christ, our Savior. Martin Luther King was a good Samaritan. Let me just quickly say, when I was a boy, between 7 and 8 years old, my father left my mother with 3 little boys, and I was the oldest by 3 and 4 years. And it was the Martin Luther King seniors, Martin Luther King Sr. and Alberta Williams King, who became surrogate parents to me, and I grew up in and out of their house. Martin Luther King Jr., his sister Christine, his brother A.D., they became my older siblings. And that was the way I lived the rest of my life. All of the things that happened grew out of my relationship with them. When I became the first student whose picture appeared on the 5-star final of the Atlanta Journal in Atlanta, Georgia, in March of 1960, they used to stand on the corner saying, "Extra, extra, get your 5-star final pink edition." They don't do things like that with newspapers because everybody now just pulls up the news they text it and pull it up on the phones and twit and twat it, you know. I don't know what twitting is anyway. But the point is that my face became the first one photographed and made famous as a student being arrested for sitting in downtown Atlanta, Georgia. Now, it all grew out of all that had begun there. We were never taught to hate anybody. We were never taught we had to throw aside our fears. When we were getting ready to practice, we plan by writing a document called the Appeal for Human Rights. And you may look that up. You can Google that. And it talked about, I think you can anyway, it's in the congressional record of 1960. But it was a document by the leaders of the black colleges in Atlanta, Morehouse College, Spelman College, Clark College, Morris Brown College, Atlanta University, and the Interdenominational Theological Center, and where we wrote that we, the students of the Atlanta University Center, wish to protest and to commit our lives to changing all of the problems and every aspect of segregation and discrimination that existed in Atlanta, Georgia. And followed that with a surprise sit-in 9 institutions in downtown Atlanta. And lo and behold, yours truly became the face of it. And after those days came the marches on one side of the street where the Klan would march on one side, we'd be on the other, and in the center would be the police. And so sometimes it was almost like having the police and the Klan together against those of us on the other side of the street. But the point was, all of this grew out of the teachings that we must be concerned about our neighbor. Now, let's bring us back into it. In go back to the event. Now, it says, who were the people who walked by the man who had been beaten and robbed? Now, how many of us have walked by people robbed of all of the blessings of life on a day-to-day basis? How many times have we seen people and we just said, we don't want to get involved? You know, there's a television show on now, I think it's called What Would You Do? Anybody seen that? Oh, they don't show it up here. That's discrimination. But it's called What Would You Do? And it has a lot of situations that come on, and they have people set up to see what you would do, and it's recorded, what you would do in the same situation. So the question is asked to all of us, what would we do? And it comes back, most of us don't want to do what? Get involved. The church was created for us to get involved. It may not be sitting in, but it may be just sometimes listening to someone that you don't know. It may mean smiling at someone. I meet somebody I don't know every day of my life. If I go to the grocery store, and my brother used to tell me, you don't know these folks, they're going to cut your head off one of these days. But I'll say something, I'm going to make a little comment and do something, and almost invariably people will smile or they'll say something, but I feel good about it because that means I have recognized another person as a human being. God loves those people too. And we begin our first downfall personally when we begin to think that we are better than any other person on this earth. Because when you go to sleep at night and you examine, we all examine the deeds of the day that we've been a part of, we don't sometimes look so good about ourselves, do we? At least I know I don't. I have a habit of saying, Lord, forgive me if anything I've done to offend anybody or said anything that you wouldn't have been pleased with. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. The priest was walking along the road. Now, he might have been busy, you know, like I said, he was trying to get to a meeting of the Board of Trustees. And so he, or the Board of Deacons, or the society, such and such a group, his bowling group, or his golfing men. And so he said, nah, I ain't got time for that. Somebody will stop. And so he walked on. Then the Levite, same thing. Nobody wanted to get involved. And then here comes the Samaritan, who's different from the man on the road. But what does he do? He does not ask what will happen to me if I stop to help this man. But he immediately just stopped and went over. And he saw the man had been hurt and he needed help. When I was in my the first group and gathering of my junior class in seminary, when I first entered ministry, we had a professor by the name of Lucius Tobin. Little short, dark man who we all thought was crazy. But those are the kind you have to watch, those little crazy-looking folks, because we just said those are the ones with the brains. But he went around the room, and there may have been about 35 or so of us, 35, 36, and he said, "So-and-so, why are you here?" And we all tried to answer. So he came to me because I had known him from old Reverend King's house from as a kid. So he said, now, Brinson, you here because Dad sent you over here. And I said, no, that's not so. I was laughing to myself, but anyway. But he said, I'm going to tell you why all of you have been called here in this ministry. And he went on to say, all around you, wherever you go, whether it is parish ministry or whether it is just your neighborhood, your family, or whatever, but there will be people who are falling down, and you are being sent to help to keep people on their feet. I never forgot that. And I thought about that in the 21 years of pastoral ministry that I've had, and of course in the administrative years that were longer. But I thought about the fact that every person out there that I see and meet is subject to falling down, even the strongest one of us. And the gospel of Jesus Christ through us can make all the difference in the world as we help to keep people on their feet. Martin Luther King Jr. accepted this. In Birmingham, Alabama now, in 1964. No, since 1963, when at the heart, because 1964 he got the Nobel Prize, but 1963, in the spring, it was in April, you heard about when they were boycotting in Birmingham, Alabama, so that they could use the department. They just even women could go into a department store and try on shoes or buy a hat. Just total discrimination in everything. And there was a man who ruled and reigned over it called Eugene Bull Connor. And he didn't have a whip, literally, but he ruled as though he had a whip cracking people. And when there were marches to demonstrate against segregation, he unleashed dogs and water hoses. I've seen water hoses just knock people, women and young people down to the street. You know what a fire hose looks like, how forceful that water is? And just stand off and just look at it. Little brim hat around and dogs growling at people, all of this. And so there was another plan to march, and this was during Holy Week, Easter week. Now, years ago in the South, I don't know what the custom was up in these parts, but you didn't have spring breaks. You had Easter holidays, and that was right before Easter Sunday. They had maybe that Thursday, Friday off from school and all. So that Good Friday, the little children were going to put on the little girls in their white dresses and the boys in their dark suits and little suits, and they were going to walk through town and to sort of just demonstrate in a quiet way the rules of segregation as they had infected all of them. And so that day, this was on a Thursday, on a Wednesday, gathered in the A.G. Gaston Motel Now, that was the fabulous Negro Motel in Birmingham. You can imagine how fabulous it was. But the hotel had just a little square-like, and with like a U, but it was a square instead of a rounded U. And down had 2 floors, and down there were cars and reporters, and you used to have old flash cameras and all police down in there. Eugene, and upstairs on the 2nd floor on the end, and the first 2 connecting rooms, which were called a suite. Now, you know what hotel suites are like, but this was just a room with a bowl in the middle. And so they had 2 beds on one side, bed, and then the face bowl and all right in the center. And if I'm going to say M.L. Jr., because that's the way I know him, M.L. Jr. was laying back on the bed above some pillow with his hands just like this. And around the room, the circle right around there were people like Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth, Y.T. Walker, Reverend King Sr., A.D., Ralph Abernathy, who was M.L.'s constant companion. Well, they were all there. And the injunction had been handed down to say from Bull Connor to say that he would not be responsible for any of those little children or what happened to them. Otherwise, he would list the dogs or the holes or anything. It didn't matter. And so they were all saying, well, you know, we can't do this now. Dr. King Jr. never said a word. He just still sat back there and listened. And they all went around the room, and they talked about why they couldn't. Ralph Abernathy had just gone to Atlanta's West 100th Street Baptist Church, a new pastor, to succeed the Reverend A. Franklin Fisher, who died. And so he said, you know, I can't, you know, I always go to jail, we go together and so forth, but I can't go now because what would it look like I'm going to be absent from my church on Easter Sunday? The first time I'm that pastor. Can you imagine the pastor being not at church on Easter Sunday? Then the others went around and talked about, well, we don't have money, we don't have so forth. They went around, so they were everybody was against it. Now, I just happened to be there because I started my first teaching job in 1961 when I got out of Morehouse College. And so that was the Easter break. So I was driving Reverend King Sr. He and I drove down the old highway, Bessemer Highway area going down toward Birmingham. And you didn't have all the I-20s then. Just had the road, one car going this way and one coming back and forth. And we played dog all the way. You know what dog is? Sure had to hold people. Dog is a game. You try it sometime. Of course, it'd be different now. It'd be difficult to play it because the scenario is the same. But we would ride along, and he would, as Reverend King would say, well, you know, if you find just a regular old dog, that's 1 point. Then if you find a black dog, that's 10 points. If you find a white dog, that's 15 points. You know, just giving them these rules. So if you see a dog, you yell, dog! And whoever gets that dog or gets the points for that, then whoever gets to be 21 wins the game. So we ride along. I'm sitting down. He taught me how to drive on the road, so forth and so on. So I'm driving in his car, we ride along. He's sitting back over like this. And so we were going along. And remember, he's a country boy, raised in the country down in Stockbridge, Georgia. And so when we be riding along, he said, dog! I said, wait, there's no dog over there. What dog? Where you see that kid? Reverend King, where you see that dog? And he said, see that house up there? He said, there's going to be 1 or 2 dogs laying up there. How much you want? And I said, oh, okay. So we ride on up there, and lo and behold, we around 12 or 1 o'clock at night in the south in the summer. In the spring, it's hot. Well, the dogs are up under the house so they can get in the shade. So it took a country boy to know that. I never would have thought of that. So he knew there was going to be, everybody had dogs out in the country there, so he knew that there was going to be some dogs under the house. So he hollered, dog! Anyway, I played that game with my children years later. It wasn't effective, but anyway. But that's how I happened to be in there. And so we were there in the room, so they had all talked about why they can't go. So he got up and walked over to that face bowl and turned on the faucet and took some cold water and wiped it over his face just like this. And then he got up, and he had a photographic memory. He could write something and remember it just like that, or see it and remember it. And so he said, Ralph, I know you can't be from what missing so-and-so. He kept going on around, and he remembered what everybody had told him. And then he said, but I gotta go because I gave my word. Do you hear this now? Lives are threatened and endangered. But he said, I gave my word. Martin Luther King Jr. was a Samaritan who cared, but he gave his word. People talk about, well, so-and-so. He never even really made any money on his own. The money that he would get from going out, he was the attraction for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. He would take that money and put it back into the organization to keep it alive. When he was at Ebenezer, he came back as co-pastor. His check didn't even come to him. It went to Coretta. He never worried about anything for himself. It was always about others. During my junior year and the second year in seminary in Atlanta at ITC, if you go back to any of the old bulletins, you'll see ministers Martin Luther King Sr., Martin Luther King Jr., Albert Paul Brinson. That was after August the 4th in 1963 when I preached he led me into the church that you saw on that. Did you show that film? Well, the church that you saw there, that was our church, and that church was jammed full on a Sunday night because he had urged everybody to come back, and because he was going to present me to the church to preach my first sermon. And at that time, I went to seminary in the fall, but I'm trying to relate now just what happened. I worked at the church, and you know what that meant, work. I was at home. So, I was doing it, learning, and sitting under him, but it did not mean I was really getting the salary, if you know what I mean. And I was already married. So that was the thing to do in those days. You didn't, there was no, you married. Nobody commented, you know what I'm talking about? I remember once when I was getting ready to get out of college, two of my buddies, Billy and Kennedy, and I said, we're gonna get out, we're gonna get us an apartment together. My grandma said, you gonna do what? Things like that were unheard of. Even from our generation of people like that, they didn't do that. But anyway, to make a long story short, when we were talking about the fact that when you made up, when Martin Luther King was coming along, we did not have the luxury of doing a lot of things that people just take for granted right now. But I had gone to that second year. Ralph Ross, who was a minister and was a Navy chaplain, but he wasn't a Navy chaplain then. He and I were friends at seminary. Ralph had already come back. He was a couple of years older than I was. He already had a family of 3 or 4 people and children. So we both, he went first out to Eastern Airlines. And Eastern Airlines, they used to be one of the world's largest airlines at that time. Most of you people are too young to have heard about that. I see 1 or 2 might have heard about it. But anyway, it used to be a strong carrier, transporter for military, et cetera. In the days when the airline industry was highly respected. And so Ralph, no Negroes did anything in the airline industry in the South except carry bags. So, bags, load the bags from the plane and so forth and so on. So Ralph went and we tried to break that open. So he became the first, they really didn't have a reason to deny him, but he became the first Negro customer services agent, and I became the second one. And the 2 of us were the ones that broke open the airline industry in the South. Then other airlines began to follow. But I'm using that to let you see that we wore the uniform just like the pilots. And on the pilots, their wings and everything were brass, and ours was silver. And so we caused a lot of attention, so forth and so on, and all the attention was not positive. But it opened the door to the industry for all the Negroes and others that you see, colored people and blacks that are still working in the airline industry now. But because of that, and I had to relate that, because of that, in 1968, I was still working at the airline, still over at the church. And so ML came, he was going to Memphis. So he came to the Ionosphere Lounge where they would hold him a lot of times until he could go and catch the plane. He was going to Memphis. And we used to have a joke about that plane because we said the plane arrived before it left because there was an hour's difference in the time in Atlanta and Memphis. So, but anyway, he came over and he said to me, he asked if I was on duty. And so there was a German woman by the name of Verplank. Her name sounded Verplank, and she was as Verplank as that name sounded. And but anyway, she handled the VIP Ionosphere Lounge, and so she came. So he sent her to see if I was over in operations, if I were on duty. And so they said he was. So they sent for me, and I went in there. And he said, "Albert, now what is this I hear about Mr. Bowen? They want you all to come to New York." And I said, he said, "Mother told me that they're trying to offer you a church in New York, and I told you I have other things that we have to do, other plans." And he said, "Don't make any decision until I get back." He never got back. When he came back, you know what happened in Memphis. The day of his, people have asked me so often, where were you when he died? Well, on that afternoon, I was over at the work doing businessmen were flying in and out of Atlanta, connecting, so forth and so on. And it was a rainy day. And so I was supervising the concourse on Concourse A. It was the old airport when they had an A, a B, and a C, and the planes on either wing. And so a fellow by the name of Ed Martin, who was an agent who's dead now, and another guy came down looking at me, and they asked me if I would step inside. All these people out waiting, and I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Martin Luther King Jr. just got shot." And I had seen these people, these businessmen. They weren't Negroes then. Now it's almost all white. Period. The men, and they weren't women either. They were just white men, mostly. And they had these little radios, the portable radios these people used to walk around with, and they were listening to things that I didn't know what they were listening to, but they said Martin Luther King Jr. has been shot, and they came to tell me because they knew the involvement. So now I turned and I said, "Oh Lord, no, please don't let him die." And I guess I was just praying, said, "Please don't let him die." So about within the half hour, they came back. And see, this is late news. It had already happened. And so he came back and he said to me, and they said to me, and they started coming. I said, "He died, didn't it?" And he said, "Yeah." So I turned, went around to the concourse and ran out in the rain, fully dressed in uniform, ran straight across to where planes are parked in, planes straight across from B to A. And to A to B, and when I got to the B where the Ionosphere Lounge was right inside, I opened the door and walked in. And there in that doorway was Coretta, Mayor Ivan Allen, and several of the police and everything, his sister Christine and some others. And they were standing there. What had happened was they had already gotten the news earlier, and they were rushing them out to be flown to Memphis to see what they had not received the news that he had died yet. But I didn't know that. But they were getting ready to take them into the Ionosphere Lounge to talk. There were policemen and everything. So I turned. I didn't say anything to him. I just turned, crying, and ran all the way back over there to where I was. So he see me and two agents running there back and forth across this thing in the rain. And I ran back, and I knew. It was done. It said, well, do you want us to take you home? I said, no. I had a new little Volkswagen that the first new car I'd ever had on my own that I felt really proud of. And so a little Beetle. And so I said, no, I guess. So I went and got in that car, took me over to where the company parking was. I drove all the way out, rushed home. At that time, my wife and I lived right behind Reverend King Sr.'s house around on the other street up the hill. And they lived around the corner. So I had keys. We were staying out of there so they wouldn't be by themselves lots of times because of threats and all. So then, I got to enter our neighborhood, and there were policemen everywhere. And they said, where are you, where are you going? You can't come in here. And I showed them who I was, and I said, I live right up the hill here. And so they let me through. And I went and I called on the phone. I called around to the house, dialed around to Reverend King Sr.'s house, and my wife answered the phone. She had come from school and had already gone around there. And so anyway, one thing led to another. But on the day of when his body was to return, they gave me, Easton asked me if I would be willing to be the agent in charge of the bringing of that flight. And they asked me, well, could you do it? Could you do it, Brinson? I said, yes, I can do it. Anyway, so the day that they brought the family, Senator Bobby Kennedy, had there's so many stories, related to all of this, but Senator Bobby Kennedy had chartered an old American Airlines Constellation. And the Constellation at that time was a plane that at the back, it was a 4-engine prop plane, but on the tail it had two round circles like on either end out there. And so he chartered one of those planes to bring Bobby Kennedy's body, ML's body back to Atlanta. So on that day, when it occurred, I'm standing in back with all these reporters and everything back inside the door there. And it's all outside, and they had stopped the arrival of planes at that time, and they gave it free to come in. So the plane, so I've been trained to be able to identify any plane in the air by the sound of the engine. And so I listened, and they told me it was this, the guy said it's on. Came up from operations, said it's on. And so that made it just touch down. And so then it started coming up, I could hear it. It was coming straight on up, and we're down this way. And when it came up to make the pivot, make that right pivot to come down facing me, I walked out. I first heard them cut one, 2, 3, and it was turning on 4, on the 4th engine. And it came down slowly, and I'm standing out in the center of the concourse, just like this, with my hat, everything exactly in order, like Captain Eddie Rickenbacker had taught the Eastern Airlines people that was the image. And when it came down, it comes all the way down, and then the ramp serviceman chunked it over, and I walked around, turned to it this way, and when the nose came up, I stood right there, eye to eye with the pilot, and saluted him, and he saluted me, and then I turned and walked back to the back of the plane. And they brought the belt up. And when they did, they opened up the back thing, and they began to roll the body, slide it down the belt. And there I am standing at the bottom of it. I add this personal thing because, there are thousands of stories I've overlooked, right? It's just in between that little time. But my point is, Martin Luther King Jr. started by trying to be a good Samaritan, by being concerned about what happened. He could have gotten out of there and said, man, no, this thing getting rough, I'm getting out of here. But no. I had seen him in situations where it's like a curtain going up. You know, when the actors, when they get ready to go up, when the curtain goes up, they watch out, they lollygag on that and do their thing. Well, I have seen him when he was really overcome and afraid, not knowing what was to come, And he would just get himself together like silent pray and then walk on out and be introduced to another waiting group of people, even after threats, not knowing what was going to happen. And he always knew that his life was going to be taken. He accepted that long ahead of time. In fact, he said he had lived longer than he ever thought, because in 1963, when John F. Kennedy was killed, he said, I know they're gonna, you know, if they kill the president, they're gonna kill me. He said it publicly and privately. But my point is that he gave all he had. Now, what does that mean for you and me right now, here in 2014? All of the movement that was done, all the advancements that were made, were done on the aegis of the church. The church was in the background, working to bring changes to the people along life's road. Where are we now? Some of you saw the poem that I allowed a young woman to use as a television master's degree in TV production. I wrote it. That was written back in 1960. But it was just as relevant. I am today that old man, still dealing with some of the very same things. We find a sleeping church in a world where the Samaritans are along the road, and we are often just walking by. Sometimes they're hungry. Sometimes they are just wanting a smile. Sometimes people are just wanting an embrace or a hug. Sometimes it's in your own household. My friends, where is the church in the world of people on the Jericho Road? In our country right now, what are we arguing over? What is it? We happen to have a black president. Oh, you didn't know that? A black man was elected to the highest office in the land. And if you've ever been in his presence, he is as real as you see him. He's genuine. He's gifted and talented and committed. But he has been challenged every way that he turns because he is a black man. Now, they can give all the other reasons they want, but in the standing in the eyes of God, we know what the truth is. He has been the most disrespected president. And I'm not a politician, but I am a human being. And I can see, because I've grown to see the wisdom that has come out of all these years. And whatever he says, the whole group, we're going to fight it regardless. It's not going to work. It's not going to do this. What kind of Christian spirit is this, supposed to be from Christians, many of them? You know, and we don't like to say things, but it's the truth. The truth hurts. It burns. It stings, especially when it's our truth. Martin Luther King Jr. came along to try to ultimately move to open the doors for Barack Obama and for Hillary Clinton, or from whoever it is, but to open new doors so that we will not have always the discrimination. We are beginning to be a large part of America that's saying, God bless America and no one else. God is the creator of all of the peoples of the world. You burn us, we burn. You run over us, we die. You break our hearts, we hurt. All of us. Where is the voice of the church in 2014? Sure, we remember Martin Luther King Jr. We remember Nelson Mandela. Two people, but I could never forget the experience of a young woman in Race Church out in an area above downtown Soweto area, who was in a church where they were registered to vote, where they registered to vote, where we had to work for days to get people registered to vote. And they were in circles, just standing around, not saying a word, just waiting to vote until their time came up. And there was one young woman, and I'm standing here with my badges on and the cap and all the other stuff, and those, some of us had the walkie-talkies and so forth and so on. And this young lady came running toward me, and I said, "What's wrong? What can we do? What happened?" And she said, "I go to my grandmother's grave." And I said, "What?" She said, "I tell her I vote. I tell my grandmother I vote." She just ran off and cried. And I'm standing with my shades on. I'm a grown man. I stood there and cried too. Because I felt none of them had ever voted before in a country where they were the majority. And I said to myself then, what is wrong with our world? And this same man that was elected rose up to become a symbol of the world, in prison for 20 years or so, in the worst conditions, and went from prison to president. Now, great spirit. And that's what he was called. He was a great spirit if you just were in his presence. Warm, not repulsive at all, trying to love his enemy. Church, if these people can do this kind of thing, what do we want our final epithet to be? Well, I kept my mouth shut. I didn't get involved. She kept her mouth shut. She didn't do anything. He didn't say anything. He didn't cause no trouble. Jesus said, "Who is your neighbor?" To anybody who needs you. Yeah, did I tell you this? No, I don't guess so, but I was talking to him. But this week in our close, I was out in Seattle. Did I tell you this about where the Japanese were, at the end of the war, the beginning of the war? Well, I went to this memorial park. It's out in the woods. It's across, you take a ferry all the way across the bay. And it's quiet. You don't hear anything, but there's a body of water, lake down there. And when you walk along, you wind down through the grass, and these old trees, like they're tall as this building. And it's just quiet. You hear birds chirping. And along there's a wooden road all along. And there on those roads, there were names of people. This was the final road that these people walked when they were taken off down to that lake, away from everything, to those concentration camps. And some of the names had like children's names, 12 years old. And you know, what could those little children have been doing? It was just, and I was reminded of the inhumanities that we're involved in with each other. My brothers and sisters, if you don't remember one thing I said, we were created to love each other. And when it's genuine, you know it, because it goes from heart to heart. You strip away the colors, the textures, the accents, and all there is is an embrace that says, you are my brother or you are my sister. I watched Martin Luther King Jr. pick up the greatest of mantles to walk down the road to try to help the man or the woman who had been robbed of their dignity and their personhood. And that's what we're called to do as a church. Let us bow our heads. Dear God, we don't always know what to do or what to say. We don't always have the courage, even when we know that we should stand up for something that we see is wrong. Help us, oh God, to grow so that in the stillness of this moment, in this beautiful room, that we might somehow see our Savior with outlifted arms saying, come. We thank you for this gathering, O God, and each of these persons, for in this moment we are all equal in your love and your forgiveness and your promises. We thank you for Martin Luther King Jr. and all those who followed. He didn't do it by himself, but we thank you for using him and inspiring him and giving him the courage to do the right thing in the sight of the Savior, in whose name we pray. Amen.
Neighbors, thank you for coming. At this time, we will have an offering, during which time we'll have the pipe organ playing. In the past, we had people come and they would say, well, does your pipe organ work? Or do you use your pipe organ? Because many churches have stopped doing that. So part of our gift to you, other than hearing Dr. Brinson, is to hear our pipe organ. We take an offering at each of our events. God has blessed us as a church, and we can take care of our day-to-day needs. But he's also blessed us with a building that has many needs. And so we're using the offerings that we receive here, not for our speakers, but so that we can take care of our ministry and continue to do ministry from this place. And that God may use this place as a way for us to help our neighbors. from the audience. Do you have any questions for him? Yes.
Thank you.
Where that a family might have been harassed or tormented. Did you or your family experience anything like that relative to you or your family or wife because of where you live? You must have been a known, person that was part of what was right to do.
Well, I was never really a famous person. I didn't see myself as that. But I did learn that when Jimmy Carter went to Washington, and most of us did not know a lot of things about the inside of us, what went on. But through Ben Brown, who became the deputy director of the Democratic National Committee, he was the first Negro, I think, at that time. Carter appointed him to that. And when Ben's dead now, Andrew Young went to the United Nations as ambassador, some other things. But we began to learn something about the real workings of government. And I learned painfully that our phones had been tapped. That was in the time of J. Edgar Hoover. And when I say that, I mean, we were nobody, I was no conspirators or anything, but anybody that, we found anybody who talked to ML or Coretta on a regular basis. And when ML came back to Ebenezer, I used to talk, well, sometimes twice, or maybe at least once a week, because he would be traveling out, and so he would leave me responsibilities and I into ministry. And he would always call me and ask me about things that were going on at the church. And with Reverend King Sr., that was, I don't know. It was not, we didn't think of it as being in a great big, we never thought of ourselves. We knew what the dangers were. But and there are some other things that I would not talk about personally, but there are a lot of things that happen to people. People were framed in situations lots of times, and set up so they, in situations where they couldn't say anything or do anything. There were all kinds of things that went on, believe me. And those things have not stopped. They still go on right now because there's a lot of hatred out here. And we talk about terrorism. We have our own sense of terrorism that nobody else ever comes to the country. People are terrorized every day in many ways. Hate knows no color. Hate knows no nationality. All the purists are not here, just like all the crooks that we used to say when we were growing up. It used to be the cowboys and the Indians and the crooks. Remember those days? They don't have crooks anymore. But that's what they did. We used to go to the movies and they called them crooks. Well, they still have crooks. I don't know if I answered that, but that, we've seen all kinds of things. I mean, that's all I can say. Right. Did I see a hand? Were you way over there somewhere? I'm only joking with you. Come on, I'm a great comedian. Come on. That's part of it's called survival.
Question, I just wanted to say that it's an incredible honor and privilege to be in your presence and to hear you speak about love. I think we forget often about that's what we're here to do, to spread that message. So thank you.
One other thing I can say in light of that, I remember when you will remember, some of you, the letter from Birmingham jail. If you haven't read it. It's a classic. And this is going on at the same time, all the things that were going on in Birmingham. And there were ministers in churches right there. White ministers and denominations that never said one word. And folk were this is all on the news, being hosed down in streets and all that. They didn't do anything. But that was the point. And I remember, and I always remember Billy Graham. But please don't have me killed for this one. But I remember he was saying that Billy Graham was giving a revival in Montreat, North Carolina. I'll never forget that. And he said, and all these people, he drew the largest crowd. This was a Christian there. George Beverly Shea was singing and all these other things.
And at the very day that this stuff happened, they never said a word. It was all over everywhere, you know, but I mean, there were a lot of things done, but it's like now. Somebody asked me who's my favorite person in the Bible. I said, you crazy? Jesus. Jesus is my favorite person in the Bible. It ought to be all our favorite person in the Bible, because the New Testament is about Jesus as the answer to what the Old Testament was seeking, you know. It's amazing sometimes, but listen sometimes to, just give yourself 1 hour of news one day and listen to some of the things that come out over the air. You know, it's just so, I don't know. And some of us, we want to hope that things can change. And they can, and they have in some ways, but the loudest voices are not those of change. They're the ones of hold on to this. We gotta knock this out, you know. One of the things I've found as I've gone around, especially with a lot of men, that some people say there's a difference in men and women. And other than the physical, I don't know. I've just been married to one 53 years, I don't know. But men sometimes can come together and knock heads and still just come on and respect each other. But that's what I find sometimes. I don't quite get what is happening. And without calling names sometimes, some of these people, it just doesn't make sense. And I'm one of these logical thinking people. If you want to get to the corner, you go to the corner. You don't go all the way around here and go all over there and then come back to the corner. You go to the corner. You know, so it just doesn't make sense to me. And it pains me, really. I look at sometimes the news at some things that are happening. And it's about the guns. All these folk are fighting to have guns. They even talk about something like, I think in Georgia where I am, they're talking about trying to legislate to have guns be brought to churches and into the schools. What kind of stuff is this? Where's the church in all of this? You know, it's I don't know, it's just young people. You have a chance to make a difference, you know, wherever you are. You know, you don't have to go along with all these wild folk who threaten you and everything. Just step away from them and let them go and do themselves in. You know, we can't change everybody, but we can stay out of their way lots of times. And take our stands quietly other places, you know. It's lonely, but I have learned, I guess I'm old, you know, folks say old folks know, because they've done everything, all the bad stuff, so now they finally come home being good. But I have learned that I don't think God ever really leaves us totally alone. I remember when I was a student at NYU, when I was in my first church in New York, the one that Dr. King Jr. wanted me to take, but I took anyway after he was gone. But I used to go down to take the train in Queens, down the Flushing train, down Roosevelt Avenue. I would go all the way down to the Village. And I used to find myself on that strap, hanging on to the strap on that. And all the time, I'd just be saying, Lord, you know, I got to do this, and so, and I smile at people on that and go on and so forth. And I realized that I was carrying God with me everywhere, and that I was never really alone. And that's the way it is with all of us. You begin sort of, it's your friend you carry with you at all times, and in your awareness. And when you do that, I've learned that you got to be aware of your brothers and sisters. Now, some of your faces I will look into. I won't remember all your names, but I remember some of your smiles or some of the other things. And I always tell, when I was still working as Associate General Secretary for American Baptist Churches, I used to go out to all these little towns and all around the United States, these little places you probably never heard of. And a lot of these little white ladies come up to me, hey, Dr. Al, so-and-so. And I said, don't worry. If I don't see you again, I'll see you when I get there. And we always joke. But that's what it's about. If this journey doesn't have any purpose to it, there's no need of having it.
you know, it's got to have something that we can hold on to. And as I said, the rest of us are moving on off the scene. In my church at Ebenezer, where I was baptized when I was 8 years old, right downstairs in Ebenezer. If you ever get a chance to come to Atlanta to visit the whole area, the parks, the national parks, it's an inspirational thing. And let me know sometime. I'd be glad to walk you through that. I do it with colleges, university students, and tell stories. But I look at all of the people who come there, and they are inspired. And I get letters sometimes, things that said, Dr. Brinson, your presence meant this, but I'm one of a kind now. I'm saying that. Some of you are older in this church family and all too. But you got to replace yourselves and be prepared to do that. I look for folks to say, hey man, what you going to do when I'm gone now? You got to be the one. You got to do it. And this is what generations pass on and on. And we've got to say, we can't just dump our whole generation out there in the lake somewhere and say, well, they've been here, it's gone, boom. Nothing happened before they got here. And some of us as older people feel that because we worked hard to try and make a contribution. It wasn't for ourselves. We are not the Joshua the new generation is called the Joshua generation. Joshua can do it by himself. He doesn't need Moses. Just forget what Moses did, it all gets to be personal. But it's all about a person, I'm just an old man's rambling. But if there's anything, anything you want to ask, just anything personal about anything that just might have been on your mind, if I can answer that, I'd be glad to. But if not, just don't forget us. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
This time.